This is an opening. Openings are an essential part of storytelling. A good opening can set the mood, help people understand what they're in for, and bring an audience in like catching a fish on a hook. Hence why they are also often called your hook. Openings are very important, as I have previously stated, which is why we believe in having a good opening here on Knights of the D-Pad, without scuff and without problems of any sort. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Knights of the D-Pad.
Zero scuff, never. This is a scuff-free podcast.
A certified scuff-free, put the stamp right there.
Mm-hmm.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's good to be back.
Happy to have you back.
Yeah, welcome to my first alumni appearance on Knights of the D-Pad. I am here as a graduated man, currently on the job hunt post-college, with some promising things that I'm looking into, so that's fun. But I'm also here with Ben, Lillian, and
Hi.
who's this? You've seen him before.
Once.
Once.
From a very far distance.
Say hello to Lillian's husband, Hiram.
Husband person.
He is going to be joining us in place of Cort today because Cort has got a crazy schedule down where he's at. That's
Dominican Republic,
right? Yeah. And things are changing last minute all the time. So he was kind of flip-flopping back and forth on whether he'd be able to be here, but we got it figured out. And there were definitely not severe mic issues that delayed the recording of this podcast.
Nope. Not whatsoever. None whatsoever.
Well, actually, no, they weren't mic issues, come to think of it.
They were just
it
OBS
was my
issues.
system. They were OBS issues. They were program issues. Everybody blame Ben for...
For having zero experience whatsoever and being the only one having the computer strong enough to handle this.
Well, I mean, I have a computer strong enough to handle this, but this is my studio, which has much better sound quality. So, you know...
Sound quality, schmound quality. I'm in the basement.
Well, some of us are working towards eventually making our living off their voice, so... Anyway, let's get started. We have an episode full of interesting and fun news topics. Do I have anybody who wants to go first?
Well, I'm personally pretty excited to hear about Pokemon Presents. I heard there were quite a few things announced this last week.
Yeah.
Yes.
Take it away, Lillian.
Some of the there was a lot of collaborations that were announced and some fun additional Pokemon in Pokemon Sleep and Pokemon Cafe Remix, which I played Pokemon Cafe and I'm excited for the new outfits and Pokemon, but that's not very exciting for most people. The second most exciting thing for me, I find exciting, but a lot of people don't find exciting. I am excited that Pokemon Trading Card Game is getting a cute little new app. I am hopeful. I don't know if there's any information on whether this is the case, but I'm hopeful that I can carry over all of my Pokemon cards from the Pokemon Trading Card Game Online to Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket. But I don't know that they will do that.
We'll see about that, because, I mean, one of the big things with the Pokemon Trading Card Game is for any of the competitions or anything you need to use the newest stuff, I don't know how far back it will allow you to be able to upload cards.
Yeah.
At the same time, they can also check and see at what set each card was printed in. So for like a tournament, they could just filter. This does remind me, though, I don't know if any of you guys remember, but there was a while ago a stint that they did with this special e-scanner that you could scan your Pokemon cards with, and then it would bring them online. And this was early. This was a few generations into Pokemon cards.
I have a bunch of my Pokemon.
The e-reader.
The e-reader, yeah.
I have a bunch of my Pokemon cards online right now, and I really like playing the Pokemon Trading Card Game, but people don't like playing with me.
Oh.
Well, you do play with me.
The only time I ever played the Pokemon Trading Card Game, like the actual card game, was
Yeah.
on my mission at the very start of COVID.
Yeah.
We at the start of COVID, we got stuck inside. It was like, for me, it was like me and like 40 other missionaries in this one house,
Oh man.
and we got
Wow.
stuck there for a week.
That's
We were not
fun.
allowed to leave at all because we were waiting to get plane tickets to go back home.
Ah,
so
so you couldn't really do
we
anything.
couldn't do anything. I learned how to play Yu-Gi-Oh. I learned how to play Pokemon. I learned I learned how to play guitar a little bit.
Oh man.
Like,
hey.
because we had nothing to do, and we were a bunch of bored 19, 20-year-olds.
You know,
Nice.
Pokemon was actually decently popular in my mission as well. Not as big as Magic the Gathering. Magic was huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I ended up kind of learning it. I would say for the first time on my mission, and I like how fast-paced it can be. You know, Magic
Mhm.
can sometimes be pretty slow burn,
Yeah.
depending on like what kind of decks you play. But Pokemon is always pretty quick.
Yep.
But
And
like,
I enjoy that it is kind of a similar gameplay to Magic, but it is not quite so long.
and it's a little simpler too.
Mhm.
Magic can get insanely complicated very fast, which can be fun. But you know,
Yeah.
I still think I slightly prefer Magic the Gathering, but
Oh, yeah.
Pokemon's is still a solid card game.
Yeah.
Did I ever tell you guys the story of how my older brother and I used to play Pokemon TCG? Because
No, but I'm
we
curious
didn't know.
to see what it is because
We
there's
did
been a
not-
lot of really creative ways people have tried to play the game.
Oh yeah, I've heard some really funny stories. I think there was a YouTuber who was telling a funny story about how like she and her brother would basically like have their cards and then they'd like show them to each other at the same time. And whoever had the type advantage would win or something like that. My brother and I did something kind of along those lines because again, we didn't know how to play and we had some vague idea from the TV show and I think at least one of the games that we had when we were this little.
Uh-huh.
But we had a ton of cards, right? Because every time we'd go to Walmart, we would beg to get
Beg.
Pokemon
Oh,
cards.
yeah.
Mhm.
Or we'd ask them for presents for birthday and Christmas and stuff. And so what we do is they say that you have to like reveal your active Pokemon one at a time, right?
Mhm.
But what we didn't realize is you need to pick them ahead of time. So we would fight over who revealed their Pokemon first. And then we finally decided who would reveal their Pokemon first. The other of us would basically just walk the other card out, which was the Pokemon we had with a type advantage over that one. Like Danan, Dana, Dana, na, 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 and then we'd turn them around and we'd be like, and then we would just argue about it and stop playing.
Interesting.
That was how I used to play Pokemon card game as a kid.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's
Speaking of
funny.
like begging mom to get Pokemon cards, my little sister, she's about like 10, 11 right now.
Mm.
She begs my mom like every time they go to the store. She wants to get Pokemon cards, and apparently, just this last week, she drew a card that was about worth $500.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
have
happens.
I have a card that
Mhm.
is. I used to have a card that was also worth a lot, but I
Yeah.
brought it to school in 5th grade for show and tell, and somebody stole it out of my cubby.
It's always
No.
Those elementary school kids
It was
can be
worth a
vicious.
lot. I
It's a
just
rough
thought it
world
was
out
really
there.
cool because it was shiny, and I think it was like a shiny Reshiram card.
Mhm.
Oh.
It was so cool, and I felt so bad because my brother had bought me the deck that came in.
oh.
And I like was so scared to tell him
No.
that I lost the shiny Reshiram card.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, so they're sending it to some authenticator person, and if it gets the proper authentication or whatever, then they'll sell it
Wow.
for however much it's worth, and then she'll use it to get started on buying her own little gaming laptop because
Heck
she's
yeah.
been wanting to play games with all of us, but hasn't really been able to.
It's
Just
finally
playing on
another person
on a-
for Phasmophobia.
Mhm.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I guess I am very unique in the fact that I actually played the Pokemon card game as it was intended for my age.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, I like learning how to play the Pokemon card game as it was intended was so weird because I had no idea that's how it worked. It had like this whole energy element system, whatever, with your water and your fire cards.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But I guess at that young of an age, I happen to be living around not only just I have my older brother, my younger siblings, but I also had my cousins who were a very similar age, and we were all really into Pokemon. And so my older brother and my older cousins, they knew how to play the games really well. Taught us, and it got to the point where we would hold tournaments against each other. And it eventually got to the point where we got bored of the normal typical rules, and instead of a 60 card deck rule, we changed and made our own rules for a 100 card deck rule.
So you invented Commander format for Pokemon.
Yes, we made Commander format for the Pokemon card game, and we were like, the deck is way better because when you only have 6 prize cards. So you have to kill 6 Pokemon or less, depending on the value of the Pokemon. That goes by really quickly. Whereas with our 100 card deck, it'd be 8, and you'd have a lot more options to pick from. You could have a lot more interesting composition to your deck. And so that, I would say now to this day, if we were going to play anything, we would play with those rules because they're fun.
I mean, that's kind of the same reason that the Commander format is the most popular one for Magic the Gathering. Is that, yeah, you need to have every card in the deck be unique, no duplicates except for basic lands. But when you have 100 cards, instead of a 60 card deck, like you can bring a 100 card deck to a standard or modern format, which is the 60 card format. That's allowed, but you're just guaranteeing that you're going to lose because your deck is just not going to run at all the speed that it needs to. But then if everyone's bringing a 100 card deck, you can have these much more intricate and complicated strategies and do these like really cool things that you just would never have the time to do in the other formats.
I've played a little around with having different deck sizes than what you were supposed to, especially on that week where I had nothing to do but mess around with card games. And so it's a lot more fun and it's really interesting. But aside from putting Pokemon cards into your app, I heard there was like a new Pokemon game announced that I've heard pretty mixed things about.
Yes.
What is this new one?
So not a lot is revealed about it. So this is Pokemon Legends ZA. So
we finally have Pokemon version Z.
Yes.
We had X and Y.
Fans are like, yes, we finally have Pokemon Z to finally finish the trio of X, Y, and Z. However, it's meant to follow the format of like the Pokemon Legends Arceus type of game, where it's meant to be more open world, most likely, and some people think based on the trailer it's supposed to take place in the future, when I don't think that makes much sense. Considering the trailer, even though most of the trailer is displaying the urban development, the reconstruction, or I don't know.
Urban development plan.
Yes, the redone urban development plan of the main city in that region, Lumio City. The way they display it in the trailer, it's like almost like and all the layout of everything is like a hologram, which makes everyone think, oh, it's going to be in the future. And I'm like, that doesn't make much sense, because the Pokemon Legends games are taking place in the past.
I mean, like, and haven't holograms been around in Pokemon for a long time already with the present day canon in both the games and the show?
It looks more like the trailer was meant to just be displaying 3D blueprints than like it was meant to be displaying holograms.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, it's like, looking at it, it's a 3D hologram. It goes up, it's like camera pointed down, and then it like shifts to like what looks like it's been scrawled on like old paper.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so with that seems to indicate it's likely more something in the past. Also in Pokemon X and Y, there's a lot of lore taking place that has taken place in the past. So for example, it talks about this massive Pokemon war that has taken place. I have no idea if that's going to take place in this game. If it does, it'll be super cool. If not, I'll be bummed out. But
it's like they've done war-related things in other Pokemon media. Like one of the best Pokemon movies ever was Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, and that was directly dealing with the effects of a war with Pokemon soldiers. And you see the battle begin Admittedly, it's pretty tame for a wartime battle.
Mhm.
It's Pokemon.
Yeah, it is Pokemon. They're trying to make it very friendly for a young audience, but at the same time, the subject matter was there and was not just tucked away. Honestly, I feel like the Legends format has the most potential to create some of the best Pokemon stuff going forward. Like, okay, yeah, Legends Arceus was not exactly a beautiful looking game. You know,
No.
it was the graphics were pretty pitiful, especially considering what Breath of the Wild had already done on the Switch and the Metroid Prime remakes, you know, and so on and so forth. However, mechanically speaking, man, was that a breath of fresh air for Pokemon.
Yes, it was very unique in its mechanics.
Yeah, and frankly, considering the recent kind of movement amongst other turn-based games, like Honkai Star Rail, one that I play a lot, I've talked about on this podcast before, and there's some other like pirate-themed one I saw my brother-in-law playing. I don't know the name of that one, but where you can switch up the turn order with various decisions you make. That is a brilliant way to mix up the turn-based combat that Pokemon has had. So if we continue that with the new Legends game, I mean, I think that's good. It could become a way of like where the mainline games just continue to falter because, you know, the people at Game Freak are being jerks and lazy. But Legends just kind of creeps up
Hopefully.
and becomes so popular that, you know.
My hope is that they will feel a lot of pressure especially from Pal World, to make that an excellent game.
They better.
The Pal World pressure.
I guess some things to note with this game. One, the website does specifically say the entire game will take place within the confines of this city, the Lumio city. So it won't be, it probably won't be like Legends Arceus where you're just completely roaming out in the wild. You'll be roaming around in Pokemon Paris.
But I mean, like, I'm sure it's going to be a fairly large city.
I hope so.
I hope they expand upon it. I hope they do.
If it's just a tiny little city, I'm going to be so disappointed. The game could have a dang good story if it's got a tiny map.
Yeah.
I agree. I guess one thing many fans are conflicted about is so with the Legends format, people do enjoy the fact that it's a breath of fresh air in terms of the turn-based combat, in terms of just the way you explore. That's all fun and games and whatnot. But it does change a lot of other things. So, for example, there are other different status conditions that are significantly altered. Abilities on Pokemon aren't a thing, at least in Legends Arceus. So if that carries over, then that's a very integral part of newer Pokemon that is completely removed. That would definitely anger fans. Also, Legends Arceus, while you can trade with other players, you cannot battle against other players. So
in Legends Arceus, you couldn't battle against other players?
No.
That's like
no multiplayer combat.
Isn't that one of like the biggest parts of Pokemon?
Yes. But Legends Arceus was trying to break away and try and do something new and trying to make it more of a
like Breath of the Wild
solo adventure, Breath of the Wild, explore on your own type thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with Pokemon, that is taking away a major aspect that makes it so endearing.
Yeah, I mean, like, Pokemon started selling multiple versions as a means of getting players to interact with each other from the beginning. So hopefully that's multiplayer is expanded upon in the new Legends. Yeah, if it didn't, that would really suck.
That would, yeah. So yeah, that's basically. Oh, and I guess the title of it, other than it starting with Z, one of the main characters in X and Y, his name is AZ. And
I was looking at that. I was like, isn't there a character literally named AZ?
Yes. So it is likely that with that title, there's got to be something with him or an ancestor of his in the lore.
We meet his great grandfather ZA.
But that's the thing, is AZ was the original king who started that war, and because of his that he made, he has lived so long that you actually see him in like Pokemon X and Y. So that's, I guess, the confusing thing. It's like, are you going to see the original AZ, or I don't know what's going to happen with that.
Here's how it works: is that there was a character named AZ. His kids were BC, and then there was DE, and all the way down until eventually it goes back to Z, and then it just kind of resets where it goes ZA.
So it is in the
It's a cycle.
future.
It is the future.
You see what, like 26 generations in the future? That's a long time.
13 generations, I would think.
13.
No.
Yeah, 13. It would have to
Well,
be.
if you're doing AB then CD, or you're doing AB then BC.
AB.
I said AZ, but then I was like, it's BC, then DE.
Okay,
FG.
Then it would be 13 generations. That's still a long time.
Yeah. Yep.
So exciting. We'll see how reception is after, especially how good reception was for PAL World. We'll see if they can still continue to compete, and whether or not people are still going to deal with Pokemon and Game Freak kind of giving them mediocre results.
Crap.
So
Yeah. Playing them for fools because they know it'll sell. But we've talked a lot about some games and stuff that are coming out, but we should probably get to a very promising game that is not coming out. Ben, you want to enlighten us on the unfortunate happenstance?
I just talked about it last week. I guess I can't talk about games coming out, or else the bad things are going to happen. But the Mandalorian game that was in the works, it was an FPS shooter made by Respawn Entertainment. The same guys who made Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and I really had hopes for it. It got canceled this last week due to a whole bunch of layoffs and cuts from their parent company, EA, which I will also talk about. But I just wanted to cross over this real fast, that it's sad to see it go, because there are not really many options for first person or just shooter in general based Star Wars games. I've said this many times. I don't know how many of y'all have seen Saving Private Ryan, considering it's a pretty brutal movie. But I would love to see a brutal, very realistic war showing of the Star Wars universe. Instead of following these Jedi superheroes, you're following along with this group of rebel drop troopers or something like that, shock troopers, who go in, they're behind enemy lines. Sorry, Lillian, you sounded a little funky there.
Like Clone Wars, but for a more mature audience.
Yeah, kind of like Halo 3 ODST.
Where it's there's no, I guess there is force present, but it's not a focal point of anyone. It's just people going in straight on, battling through, trying to get from objective to objective. And then I would love to see a similar game that goes along that style, where it's not you are some already super force or whatever. You are just some dude going in with a blaster, and then you've got to maybe have to deal with a Jedi or some the Star Wars creatures. There are a lot of them, and a lot of very strong ones. Imagine instead having to go against freaking Frogdo Bogdo as just a dude with a blaster instead of a Jedi. That sounds like a terrifying but fun experience.
They've done, I guess, not in terms of you're in the middle of the heat of war and going into it, but they have done the GameCube. There was a Jango Fett game that you're playing as Jango Fett, and it was more it's a solo player game, but you're kind of taking out, and you're finding all your bounties. You're trying to, all the people you're trying to hunt down.
That sounds pretty cool.
They've also done, I think it was primarily on the DS, but there was also the Battlefront Elite Squadron game, where there was no options to have Jedi at all. You're just a group of a few troopers going throughout different places. So it's not a common thing that is occurring.
And we would be remiss
president.
Yeah, and we would be remiss not to mention Clone Commandos.
I was just about to
You know,
mention that.
Yeah, but like
Yes.
at the same time, you know, not a ton of these are still very everyman. They still have like some special character, the Mandalorian bounty hunter, the elite shock troopers, you know, and
Not
to
the
be
normal
fair,
guy.
yeah, the Mandalorian Din Djarin isn't exactly a normal guy. He did feel a lot more normal than a typical Jedi, and that's one of the things that I found
Yeah.
the most refreshing about season 1 of The Mandalorian was
Yes.
the ways that he would struggle are like normal person ways that someone would struggle in that situation.
Yes.
Like
Yeah,
he's not
it's
magic force
mhm.
jumping his way somewhere. He got his like part of his
It's-
armor caught on that vehicle,
Yeah.
and now he's getting dragged upside down. Great, he's got to figure out how to get out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And,
It puts all of his danger in a much more realistic
Mhm.
perspective.
mhm.
And
And he
like
may have his blaster-proof armor, but even that's not perfect coverage.
Mhm.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there's no point in really mentioning it now, but I guess the Mandalorian game you were not going to play as Din Djarin for like you're not playing as the Mandalorian from the show. You're playing as a Mandalorian during the height of the Empire.
Okay,
And
which I
so-
think would provide even more of a an everyman than
real
Din
person.
Djarin because it's no longer this is the main character from a show.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And knowing Respawn, I'm sure there would have been also incredible personal customization with
Oh,
like
yeah.
all kinds of Mandalorian armor and like some really cool designs for
Yeah, maybe you could
helmets
get, like,
and backpacks and
paint
jetpacks or
jobs
whatever.
and stuff inspired by like the Sabine Wren's art style from Rebels. That'd be
Mhm.
cool.
That would be
Mhm.
so cool.
So it's sad to see it go, but it goes along with, I guess, the kind of things that happen as there's just a very unstable market right now. And so the Mandalorian game got canceled because we are having a bunch of layoffs at EA.
Mm-hmm.
So EA lay off about 5% of their workforce, which is about almost 700 people. And so it's all parts of the EA system. You know, you've got people working for Respawn, people working for The Sims, and it's just games
Mhm.
getting scrapped left and right. It's, I guess, something that is inevitably going to happen when you have a fairly unstable market and just an overall shift from having so many in-person workers. I feel like I don't want to be the first to go on this, but like with stuff like AI and all these new innovations, you're going to see a lot of in-person jobs getting replaced by AI and bots that like can do the job much faster, much cheaper. Maybe not the highest quality, but then you just have people come in and do post-production on it to clean up anything. The majority of the work is already done by the bot, and then just one person can come in and clean
Fix it
up instead of having a team of 10 people do it and then still have that one person to clean up.
There's another very major factor at work here as well. Two, actually, if you don't mind me hopping in here.
Yeah, sure, go
I
ahead.
was actually just like going over some like video analyses on this. There's a YouTube channel called How Money Works that was talking about this, and they were discussing a general shift away from permanent jobs at companies and the 9 to 5 shift, which has been the status quo for a very long time. What's happening a lot nowadays is that companies are trying to, well, first of all, there's a huge shift in corporate attitudes that's been happening over the past several decades that's all about driving the stock price up by any means necessary, which often involves laying off tons of employees because it reduces overhead costs, which drives up the stock price, which looks good to the investors, who then like hold their stocks for only the average stock holding price is less than a year now. It used to be decades.
It's
So that's
something that's rough just because like, we're not so much of an economics podcast, but I just want to mention it's rough because these businesses, you cannot have a stagnant business. You can't make $10 billion last year and then make $10 billion the next year. You have to make $11 billion. You always have to have growth.
there's always that.
If you
push.
don't have that constant growth, you're going to have your investors leave. It's a sad
Yep.
culture around it, but
And yeah, there's people discussing and trying to figure out like, okay, well, how are things going to change? Because obviously this won't be sustainable in the long term. And one of the places where it's the most obvious to see the issues that are coming with this current system are in the entertainment industry. We're seeing a lot of issues in video game companies, in movie and television companies, um, and more layoffs than just EA. I'm going to be talking about some at PlayStation later on. But there's another factor as well, in that there's a shift away from the employees working at one specific company to doing the same kind of work, but as gig work, where they just basically offer up their services to a wide range of companies and take whoever pays the best. And so if you're, say, a 3D modeler who works on video games, you have a lot of experience, you get hit by one of the rounds of EA or PlayStation or whatever layoffs, you then take your 3D modeling skills and start like putting up listings to just work from home. And this comes with a couple of interesting trade-offs. One of them is that like you get to pick who you're working with. There's a lot of, you get to be your own boss. There's a lot of freedom of movement, and also just the fact that you don't have to move because you are just remotely doing.
That the current generation of employees is very much values that freedom.
100%. Very many of us don't want to have to trek across the company or across the country or to another country entirely to get a job, especially with how frequent layoffs have become. But it also comes with some downsides, right? No benefits from having a contracted employer, which means that you have to pay for your own health insurance and save up for your own retirement, which means that gig workers tend to need to charge more for their services and make more within a single year in order to maintain the same standard of living as they would under a long-term employment contract, like a standard 9-to-5 job. But the interesting thing is companies are actually willing to pay higher salaries for brief bouts of gig work. They're more willing to do that than they are to bring on a long-term full-time employee. And so what they'll often do is they'll run for a while on a small crew, and then when it comes time to make this thing or that thing and kind of push towards the end of the project, they'll hire a bunch of gig workers for a few months, pay them really high for those few months, and then the project is done. And the gig workers all move on to another company. And this is becoming more and more of a trend, especially in the world of video game development. And so it's interesting to me, looking at it from the perspective of like working on building my voiceover career, because voiceover work has kind of always been like that. I mean, yes, you do have agencies, and that's a thing. And there are actually companies that work kind of like an agency, but for gig workers in various skilled labor fields like game development. But it's interesting to see an increase in just like I do one job, I move on to the next job across many different fields. We're even seeing it in things like non-video game software development. That's becoming very big. Google can hire a whole bunch of software engineers, pay them big bucks for a few months, and then be done with them, until the next big project comes along. And it's likely that a lot of these people who got laid off from EA and PlayStation recently are going to be entering that gig market. So,
and then there's going to be less of incentive to have full salary employees that you have full contracts for, where then you're just going to have people working for a month, they get paid their month salary, and then they move on. And so it's going to be interesting to see if it will work in the long run, if the government's going to have to step in and say, hey, we have to not have so much gig work, we need people to have stable jobs.
Yeah.
And so maybe there's going to be more incentives for having salary employees, but
yeah. And there could even be changes to laws about hiring processes. I mean, this is a big unfolding thing that's going to affect many different places where people work, and I'm sure it's not going to stop with the entertainment and software industries. My guess is engineering is probably going to move towards that in not too long as well. So we'll see. It's kind of crazy.
And so along with the EA layoffs, we have layoffs in another big company, with PlayStation.
So PlayStation recently laid off 8% of their total workforce, which is about 900 employees. They completely closed their London studio as a part of those layoffs, which is kind of crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy for me personally, because you won't believe where I applied for a remote job in
No
audio
way.
design just a few weeks ago. The PlayStation London studio.
You doomed them, Kyle.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Kyle
And
did
they-
something a long time ago to just really vex the PlayStation executives, and they said if this guy even approaches you, like you have to
gotta
send him
shut
away,
down
or
studio.
else you're gonna have. And then these guys, they just all they did was take Kyle's resume or whatever or application, and they were like
They're just like, oh.
X'd.
The executives get a call and they're like, hey, this is the manager of the London studio. He sent in an application. Kyle? Kyle. Burn it. Run. I'm too powerful. They fear me. And it's definitely not because of that terrible house fire incident. I mean, what?
That terrible
Yeah, so-
accident.
The terrible accident. But anyway, yeah, so that was really weird to read because I'd applied for that job and then they're like, yeah, we're not going to proceed with your application. And then they just closed the entire studio. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
well,
Gosh.
okay. I guess you couldn't have even if you wanted to, huh? But it's an enormous round of layoffs. And again, the EA and PlayStation layoffs aren't even the first round. There have been layoffs over the past several years across the entire gaming industry. And once again, we've already talked about a lot of the major factors contributing to it. The attitude of cutting expenses to drive up the stock prices, the whole shift away from full-time to gig work, etc. There's also been a number of just major underperforming games, which we've talked about plenty of times on this podcast. Once again,
Skull and Bones.
yeah, Skull and Bones. Oh my goodness. Great discussion on that, by the way, on the previous episode. That was
thank you.
very good. Yes.
It's interesting because it feels like we are talking about layoffs every single week.
Yeah.
It's
New layoffs every week.
It's big, and it's sad too for a lot of people who were hoping to get that nice 9-to-5 job in gaming. It's like, man,
There's a
and-
lot more pressure with gig work to feel like you have to, like, it's
You
not
always
just,
have to be on your toes.
yeah,
to
it's not
get
just being able to do the job, but you also have to be able to manage your own schedule. You have to be able to manage, like, be your own, like,
Boss.
voice, your own
your own advocate. You have to really make yourself stand out because then gig work is like every single job is a new application, every single project, every single task, which is quite a lot of pressure. And certainly something that a lot of people don't really like. I mean, I'm not that fond of it myself, but I'm also recognizing like that's just a reality of the career path I'm eventually pursuing. So, just get used to it. But I'm sure there are plenty of people who are much worse off in that regard. However,
It's just that there's no stability. That's one of my biggest things for it. It's just like it is very important the amount of stability you have in your life and in your job, your ability to put food on the table for yourself or your family. Like stability, it's in that feeling of stability is so important. So if you're gonna have people like stress and depression and anxiety is already high enough as it is, having everyone on a razor's edge of losing their ability to provide is not going to help.
Yeah. Now, one thing that could potentially be an advantage, and again, this is just a bit of speculation on my part, something I would love to see happen, but I have no idea if it's actually going to happen, is that a ton of these people who have just been laid off and entered the gig work economy end up getting full-time jobs with smaller development companies. And I mean, we're already seeing and it have been in for a while, what's kind of been a golden age of indie games, where games that started with small studios like Minecraft, Terraria, and recently Pal World and why am I blanking on it? Lethal Company.
Oh, Lethal Company
have just floored the AAA developers. Not to say that there haven't been some amazing AAA games that have come out recently, right? But
I mean, I don't think Helldivers 2 was a very AAA game. Arrowhead Studios, I don't think is. They have a good agreement with PlayStation, but I don't think.
Yeah, I think they're more moderate. So I think there's a potential for small to medium-sized developers and studios like Arrowhead, like Larian, I would consider them more of a medium-sized developer, and they made the most recent game of the year. So hey,
Yeah.
As well as the people who created Pal World or Lethal Company, a bunch of these other smaller, not huge game developers could take this as an opportunity to attract a ton of high-value talent
Yeah.
who have just been taken away or kicked out of these big companies, and we could see a shifting of the status quo amongst which developers are like the big wigs, which would be pretty cool. You know, kind of like trade hands, get some new people in there, some fresh blood. Might be a great thing for the stagnation that happens in a lot of AAA game development. But of course, this isn't a guarantee. It's something I would love to see. But
it's an opportunity for something good to happen.
It definitely could be. And even then, like, even if it's just that these smaller studios are just taking big advantage of the gig work economy and treating the people with gigs better than the big companies do, that's still good, you know? So there's definitely changes coming. And I hope to see the people who just are passionate and are running these smaller to medium-sized companies kind of take center stage. I would love to see that. But there's definitely a situation we'll need to keep monitoring. Hopefully, we'll get more good news along it and not just another massive round of layoffs, although we'll probably still be seeing more of those in the days to come.
Yeah, and I guess speaking of good news and good things that can come from having at least a little bit of extra budget laying around is you get the ability to have funky little TV shows popping up.
Indeed. So who here on this podcast is familiar with Deep Rock Galactic? Raise your hands. Okay, I can't see if you're raising your hand, Ben, because of the... For Rock and Stone, yeah. So, Deep Rock Galactic, I think we've mentioned it on the podcast before. For those people who are unfamiliar, though, I'll just give a brief overview. You are dwarves in space mining
dwarves.
The most hostile planet that you could set foot on that doesn't instantly kill you.
I saw a meme the other day, real quick. I just want to mention this. I saw my favorite genre of game is a group of people who are willing to dive or go into extremely dangerous scenarios for glory and or $9. And the list of games were Helldivers 2, Phasmophobia, Lethal Company, and Deep Rock Galactic.
That makes perfect sense. So Deep Rock Galactic, an easy way to describe it is it's one of the children of Left 4 Dead, right? And I would say arguably the best child of Left 4 Dead, where you have an up to 4-player co-op game where you are fighting various enemies and hordes of enemies with specialists and stuff like that while trying to complete some objective. But whereas in Left 4 Dead, you're survivors in a zombie apocalypse trying to get to safety, in Deep Rock Galactic, this is your full-time job. This is your 9 to 5. You clock into work, you get dropped from a space station into the deep crust of the planet Hoxie's, and you shoot monsters and bugs that look like the bread monster from that one Team Fortress 2 animation while mining precious minerals. But it's so much fun. It's an absolute blast, and it has like one of the most positive and wholesome communities out of any video game in recent years. There's actually a fantastic video essay about how Deep Rock Galactic tricks its players into being good to each other.
Being nice.
Which is really cool. And honestly, you go in there and you just like, you salute them with a rock and stone, which is kind of like the calling card of the game. And everyone there's just happy to have you around. People are really friendly and fun. It's a great game. They also recently released a game kind of in the style of Vampire Survivors, where it's a top-down kind of arena survival shooter-ish bullet hell type game, which has been very positively reviewed. My brother-in-law has it, and he says it's like the perfect game to play on the Steam Deck. But the news bit, which is something that's recently come to light, is that the developer, Ghost Ship Games, has revealed that they have been approached, I think multiple times, to make a Deep Rock TV show. Now, this is interesting because there's not really much of a story in the game itself. There's references to some story things, like sometimes when you hit the cheer/salute button, you'll say, "For Carl," or "For the ones we lost." And there is this sort of backdrop story of like, this is a bigger endeavor. You're part of something big that's making life better for all space dwarves. And there's a memorial hall to the people who've died mining Hoxies, but that's about it, But as much as this doesn't provide a story basis, this also means that it's very open to create something entirely new that just uses Deep Rock as a setting, which, given some other adaptations that have worked really well in recent years, I'd say that could lead to some good stuff. Now, Ghost Ship has not confirmed that they have signed any contracts, but they have been approached, and they are going through things. And they say they want to be very involved in the process of making a show. They said that if they could just hand it off and say, okay, you do it, the show would have already happened. But they want to make sure that they're doing it right, which is very encouraging news. So,
very encouraging to hear, considering everyone is like, just make it. Doesn't matter if you do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And considering the number of excellent film adaptations we've seen that had heavy involvement from the creators of the property, like the Super Mario Bros. Movie, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, the League of Legends Arcane,
Last of Us.
Yeah, Last of Us, Cyberpunk Edge Runners, not the Halo TV show. That's another matter.
That's the thing. I don't think they had much.
I don't think they had much involvement from the creators. But if we follow the trend of a film adaptation that has heavy involvement from creators, we could have a lot of good stuff come. And we could have a fantastic TV show where you watch some space dwarves go and kick butt on the planet of Hoxies.
For Rock and Stone.
For Rock and Stone. If you're Rock and Stone, you'll never be alone.
Speaking of, you mentioned earlier about like how the company kind of encourages you to be like a good and wholesome player, non-toxic player. Hell, I keep on bringing this back up just because I love this game so much. Heck Divers 2 does the same thing, where the developers are very active online and like Twitter and other spaces to make sure that people are like, hey, like they're like, do not kick people for having non-meta loadouts.
Or, I like that. I like that.
There in Heck Divers, there is very rampant like friendly fire. Like you have to be very careful with what you're doing with your bombs and where you're shooting. But sometimes you have some people who just kill other people for fun. And what they have done is they've actually created like a hit list, the developers, for players that have gone around and purposely started team killing.
Oh my god.
Oh, I like the sound of this.
And so these guys are like, in the game, they are put down as like traitors and like traitors to democracy or whatever.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness.
And so
That's
just
so cool.
The developers are all so wholesome, very nice, and
I think it's cool.
they've made a game that is very developed towards people working together, because if you don't work together, you're going to lose the game.
That's pretty awesome.
And so
that reminds me, I just heard about this last night. Did you know that there's a game master for Helldivers?
Mm-hmm. There is. So it's because here's how it works: is that in the game you are fighting a galactic campaign, like all in real time, where everyone is working together to add to a liberation score for a planet, and then when you reach 100%, then the planet's taken by you, and then you go on to the next planet. And what there is like, as you're going through, there is someone in the game, his name's Joel, the game master. He influences that. He makes it so that like the automatons or the robots will like attack certain planets, to like they'll do counterattacks, and he's there to like make it feel very alive. Because like as people put their attention towards something else, be like, okay, these guys are going to counterattack and go towards.
So there's some dude whose job is literally just to control the overall movements of the enemies in the game, to be like their 5-star general, commander of all their forces.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
And
it makes the game feel so alive and so fun.
It's pretty cool. And apparently, like, the other developers have gone on record saying, like, yeah, we don't interfere with his choices. We don't even know when he's going to
Mhm.
make one move or another. He just does his thing. And there's apparently a story of like one planet that like was so just ridiculously hard. It was like a
Malevolent Creek.
yeah, and like it's pretty much like you go in there and you just instantly get killed.
Hmm
People were
It's calling it Space Vietnam.
yeah okay. I was wondering if we could say that, but like people are calling it Space Vietnam, and,
Hmm
and it's like man, someone ticked off Joel over there.
No, we lost the planet for a day,
Mhm.
and then everyone got together. It was like, no, we need to get this place back. This place is too iconic. And so,
Which is pretty amazing, if you ask me.
mhm.
And I hope we'll see more stuff kind of taking from that as well. Again, things to hope for in the future of just like having the developers not just involved in making the game in the first place and maintaining it, but actively being a part of how the game is played. That's pretty cool.
Mhm.
I mean, kudos to the development of game master systems in games like Left 4 Dead, for example, that will see your progress and adjust the spawns of enemies to provide a consistent difficulty level. But having a live person in the chair, you know,
Yeah.
that's special.
different.
Mhm.
So I think that's all of our news topics for today, right?
That should be all of our news topics.
All right. Well, let's move on towards our fun segment. We have a neat, fun little topic for today. It's games, the first game you remember just not being able to put down. What was the first time you got sucked in by a game and you were just like, yes? And 5 hours passed and you're like, what? I'm hungry? I need to use the bathroom? What?
And so,
All right.
I guess I'll go first. I don't know if y'all remember much about the hit video game Star Wars or Lego Star Wars on the DS.
Hey!
Yes.
So,
That was mine.
I don't know if your guys' school district did this, but our school district did a thing where we wanted to. It's like before Kahoot ever existed, and before everyone had smartphones. They encouraged everyone to go get a Nintendo DS,
I've
And then-
heard about some schools doing something like this.
and then
Mine
we
never
would use
did.
PictoChat as the means for
Yeah.
doing like a Kahoot style. Everyone can send in their answers.
I have
Oh
heard
my
about that.
gosh.
Yeah.
Your
And so,
school was way cooler than mine.
That's so
what,
cool.
what can I say? But with this, I got a Nintendo DS, and you can't have a Nintendo DS and not get any games as well. And so
Yeah,
I
of
worked
course.
hard, got good grades, did everything, got my allowance, and got Lego Star Wars because I was really in love with Star Wars at this time. And then, and this is how we got my Nintendo taken away, my DS taken away, because I was staying up till 2 a.m. under my sheets in my room, just playing through all the levels of the Nintendo DS, struggling on the Hoth missions, but
Mm-hmm.
that game,
Yeah.
I could not put it down. I was staying up super late. Mom coming in, she's like, "What's going on in here?" Just hiding it under my pillow. Core memory right there.
Yep.
Oh man, that's great.
I 100% relate. My first game that I could not stop playing was first Lego Star Wars 2 for the DS,
Mhm.
which then hooked me on most of the Lego games in general to then like Lego Star Wars Complete Saga to Indiana Jones, anyway, so on and so forth. But Lego Star Wars 2 specifically, I was like 5 or 6 when I got my first DS and got that game. And so it was so much fun. It was my first game of my own. I loved Star Wars. The Lego just made it even more fun. Also, just the graphics were so bad on the
Mhm.
DS. And it made it
And the
so
overall
fun.
humor of it too.
Yes, because like all the different cutscenes that would happen in each
Mhm.
episode, whether it's like the start of it, end of it, you could continue moving your character around and like jumping around, attacking people, jumping off a cliff.
In-game
cares?
cutscene supremacy.
It was so funny. And then also with my brother, there was a DS download function where you could interact with each other, and you kind of had a
I remember
Lego
that.
Star Wars Battlefront kind of thing, where you're all playing as different bounty hunters, but in like Lego Star Wars 2 DS graphics and mechanics,
Mhm.
each other trying to take each other out. It was a very fun game.
That's awesome. I had a completely different experience with Lego Star Wars 2 on a mobile platform,
Hmm.
but that's because I made a huge mistake.
Oh no.
It was unforgivable, honestly. I
A
still have
missed
nightmares.
cake.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Haven't you heard the old joke, being a vegetarian is a huge missed steak? But so what happened was, long time ago, my parents bought Game Boy Advance. It was not the flip up one. It was the like
The
one
original
in this
GBA.
shape. Yeah.
Mhm.
And they bought it for my older brother Darren, and he played tons of Pokemon Emerald and Leaf Green, but mostly Emerald. He, I think to this day, that's still his favorite version. Which, I mean, hey, Emerald's a good one.
Emerald's really good.
Yeah, Emerald is very good. And then, but what happened was when he turned 12, my parents started this tradition of like things that these benchmarks we would hit. When we turned 12, we can watch PG-13 movies. They would also get us a DS.
Okay.
And what happened was we would pass down the Game Boy to the next brother in line, right? All four of us. And so the deal was, when Darren passed the Game Boy down to me, he could keep his Game Boy games because, you know, the DS was compatible with the Game Boy cartridges. So he'd still play Emerald on his DS. But he passed it to me, and my parents were like, we will buy you any one game for this. And, you know, Darren's like, get a Pokemon game. That way we can trade and battle with each other, you know, do this. But I was on a huge Star Wars kick at the time. So I go for Lego Star Wars 2 on the Game Boy Advance, and
Lego Star Wars 2 Electric Boogaloo.
It was garbage, man.
Wait, was it Lego
so
Star Wars
bad.
2 for the GBA, or was it Lego Star Wars 1?
Lego Star Wars 2 for the
I
Game
didn't
Boy.
realize Lego Star Wars 2 was on the Game Boy. I didn't.
That's for a reason, because the Game Boy port was like an entirely different game.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there was still like the Lego sounds, and you know, the level design was pretty similar. Cutscenes, pretty much gone. You basically just have the characters stand around and have speech bubbles with icons of like Han's face, dead. Han's face, dead. And from Jango Fett, and then Vader turns and is like, golden stud. As in like the part where Jango's like, he's no good to me dead, and Vader's like, the Emperor will compensate. I only knew that because I'd seen the movies a few times, you know.
Yeah.
And it was, and the controls were so bad, and like trying to shoot a blaster was terrible. Like, I had, and Darren was just there like, I told you so. I told you should have gotten Pokemon. It was bad.
That's funny.
Yeah, so completely different. Guys, play your Lego Star Wars games on the DS or on a home console, or on PC now that they're all on PC. But don't get it on the Game Boy. In case you're stopping by.
The original Lego Star Wars I ended up getting later on the GBA that I played on my DS. And that game, it's a very, very, very different format of game. But honestly, it's the hardest Lego game I've ever played. Like, it was like, the difficulty was actually very impressive. Like, beating levels was actually a real challenge.
Interesting. I didn't even get far enough to analyze
one appealing thing about it was very challenging.
Interesting. So, hey, Dark Souls enthusiasts who have a soft spot for Lego games, you know what to find.
Star Wars original for the GBA.
Yeah.
So Lillian, what was yours?
All right. I did a lot of thinking about this because I played a lot of games like with my siblings and with my friends, but I wouldn't say that like a lot of those games were wouldn't put down because I only really wanted to play them with other people. Like I really preferred it was like games like Wii Sports. Like that's kind of you don't play Wii Sports alone. Well, you can, but
you don't usually.
Yeah. And so I would have to say probably the first game that I couldn't put down that like I really just played was Animal Crossing. And that game, like, partly because I was not very skilled with the controller, it took so long on that game. And I remember a couple of holidays, like, I think like a couple Christmases and like definitely an Easter or two, like being so excited to play the event in Animal Crossing. Like
Oh
I did not
man.
care about the holiday. I cared about playing the event in Animal Crossing. I was more excited about like getting the little like the candies to like get the furniture in the event than I was about the actual holiday that was happening in the real world.
You have earned your gamer badge. Yeah. That's cool.
Really, and I think a lot of it was just like my inner like mobile gamer that I discover was obsessed with the events, but
yeah, I was gonna say like that sounds like my whole experience with being addicted to Genshin Impact.
Genshin.
Yeah. So I guess I've talked about a game that I didn't get stuck with, but I should talk about the one I couldn't put down, huh? So my experience was a bit like yours at first, Lillian, where for the early stages of my childhood, my experience with video games it wasn't so much limited to like only things I could play with other people, but it was limited by like where I could play it or how much time I had. Right from when Darren and I would hop onto my parents' computer to play like space pinball, to going to
the Windows one that I came downloaded.
Yeah. To going to my grandparents' house in Washington and playing the original Super Mario World or Final Fantasy VI, which was the original American release, branded as Final Fantasy III, because that's not confusing. And those were games I totally would have been hooked on, but I could only play them when we went up to Washington to visit my maternal grandparents, you know? And then we had the GameCube. We could play Lego Star Wars. We could play Harvest Moon, if anyone remembers that. Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. But somehow it never fully, it wasn't mine, you know? It was our game, my save file. Until I turned 12 and my parents bought me my own DS. And with it, Pokemon Pearl version.
That was my initial thought, and then I realized there was something a little earlier.
And yeah, it was Pearl. Pearl was the first game that I was truly like, you know, because like all the time spent playing other games, it was just limited by some factor. But I had the DS, I could take it with me, I could like sneak it into my room and play, you know, or like take it on trips, family trips, and we would like be in the car like picto chatting with each other, and just goofing off. But yeah, Pokemon Pearl version, and Generation 4 is still my favorite generation of Pokemon games ever, especially Platinum, which I later got, I think my next birthday. But there was definitely something special with getting that first copy of Pokemon Pearl and having something to call my own that wasn't an atrocious port of Lego Star Wars to the Game Boy.
Yes. That is understandable. I guess my experience with Pearl was almost the opposite, but also the same as yours, where it was the game. So initially, my older brother, he had Pokemon Pearl, and so he had his save file. And with Pokemon, you can have a save file going on, but you can only have one save file. But if you start a new game and you never save, you technically can have a second file. And you just
my goodness.
see how far you can get before your brother wants his game back.
So you were kind of speedrunning Pokemon Pearl.
I was running Pearl as best I could at age 7, 8, or whatever.
Oh man.
And until eventually I got my own copy, and then it was a similar experience where
that's hilarious.
It was very difficult to put it down.
Oh, there was another thing I forgot to mention. So at the time when I was 12, when Diamond and Pearl came out, my brothers and I really got into get excited about birthstones. It was a phase.
Okay.
Not sure why. But get this. My older brother got a copy of Diamond, which is his birthstone because he was born in April. I got a copy of Pearl, which is my birthstone because I was born in June.
Yeah.
So I was like, it was fated to be.
That's fun.
Yeah.
That is funny. Yep.
So-
Any other
Sure.
honorable mentions from our childhood?
What I want to mention is I'm sure everyone went through this phase,
Oh, here we go.
but Minecraft.
Hey.
Right, like I remember one of the
Never
happiest
went
days
through
of
that
my
phase.
life was back in, I think it was like 2012. I convinced my parents to let me get the full computer release of Minecraft for 30 bucks or whatever
man.
it was. And then I remember just sitting there, getting my first world, naming it First World, and just going, just chugging through that thing for like 5 hours. And like really, because like my only experience with that so far was the iPhone version, which
Oh,
had
wow.
like, I don't know if y'all ever remember the Nether reactor, where you didn't even have the
Oh,
Nether,
yeah.
you just had like the little blue block that summoned in the Netherite tower.
Yep. And then the world size was tiny,
Mm-hmm.
and zombies still dropped feathers.
So I know I can speak generally for everyone. I don't know so much about Lillian.
Nope,
But-
neither of us really
Oh,
did the Minecraft thing.
My parents kind of restricted my siblings and I to Nintendo and weren't about any other games or any, especially PC games. They weren't really that
Yeah.
for. So the only time I ever played Minecraft was one specific friend. Every birthday party he would have for like 3, he would have a Minecraft party, and his family had like 6 computers, and
Everyone play Minecraft.
he would get us all on one server, and we would
Oh
all
my goodness.
play Minecraft.
Heck yeah.
That's
Now
so
that's a birthday
that is
party.
that is my only exposure to playing Minecraft.
Oh my
I-
goodness.
Those like 3 to 4 hour sessions of birthday parties where we're just all on the same thing. I have no idea on other than us trying to make the biggest explosion possible to make the game crash.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember for me, like the only time I ever remember, I was probably 14 when I first played Minecraft. I was babysitting. And the kids that I was babysitting had Minecraft on their Xbox. And
Oh,
they were
man.
like, I was like, oh, I've never played Minecraft. And they were like, you've never played Minecraft? You need to play, you need to play. So they made me like sit down and like play Minecraft for like 20 minutes while they all just like watched me totally fail at playing Minecraft.
mhm.
They loved it, but yeah,
That's
my
hilarious.
only memory of ever playing Minecraft. My little sister, she plays Minecraft still quite a bit. But yeah, that was never a game. I didn't do a ton of PC games.
Hmm.
I would watch my brother play PC games when he was supposed to be doing his homework.
Mhm.
Classic childhood
We were
right
both we were both supposed to be doing our homework in the basement, and that was not what was happening. My mom would come down and my brother would be like, go, like go pretend like you're doing your homework, and he'd like quickly change it up. I'm sure she
You
knew
know-
what was going on, but
You know, come to think of it, speaking of PC games, you remind me of a couple things I'd like to throw in for honorable mentions.
Okay.
Because there's 4 of them, and I'll kind of rapid fire it because we should probably wrap this up soon. But
Mhm.
Age of Empires 2, Zoo Tycoon, Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Roller Coaster Tycoon,
Yeah, the old like
Mhm.
disc versions.
yes.
Where sometimes you would just build a ride to launch a cart and have it blow up and be like, hee.
Yeah.
Or you'd take the unhappy customer and put him on an island surrounded by food stalls. Actually, I was a little monster. I would, if there was a customer who was like leaving and unhappy, like really unhappy, I'd pick him up and drop him in the lake. Little, like, I don't even remember, elementary school me would drown the dissenting voices in Roller Coaster Tycoon so that my park would have a higher rating.
You're the one
And
ruining
anything
the-
for capitals.
And I look back on that now and I'm like, oh gosh, that was messed up. But as a kid, somehow it just didn't click, and I was like, oh no, I don't want that to
Wait,
happen. Plop.
That's why my rating's going down. Okay, well, get rid of The
Right,
thing
get-
game.
Get rid of the
Good thing my parents taught me about morality and being good to people, because if I was still like I was at like what 7 years old, and then not as extravagant as what my brother Darren did though. He built a park with one set of restrooms on an island, and the only way to get there was by going on a series of the most nauseating rides he could find that took you one way to the bathroom, and then he charged to use the bathroom. And so people would be out of money by the time they got there. And the tiny little bathroom island just kept getting fuller and fuller as everyone in the park's like, oh, I need to pee, and just funneled their way into the bathroom island.
Dude, I literally know nothing about this game, but I want to see videos of people playing it because
Oh, it's hilarious.
dumb and so
Yeah,
fun.
I remember Jeffrey used to play it. I don't
should
remember
see
a whole ton about it, but
I wonder if it's like on Steam, because I mean, Age of Empires 2 is
I
on
think it
Steam
is.
now, and I've played it on there. It's pretty good.
Mhm.
And then, oh yeah, the last honorable mention, Spore. This is one that
Yes.
actually sucked me in
I was
pretty
hoping you'd
well.
bring that up.
Uh,
and I-
love Spore.
Spore is really good. I beat the civilization stage in like 15 minutes. Got an achievement for it. That was like the first time I ever got a video game achievement before I really knew what those were. And I actually remember I wrote about it in my journal because I was so surprised at this thing that popped up. But Spore was such a good game. So
good.
good.
Mhm. Yep,
Alright.
we're all good games we couldn't put down, and now here we are at a gaming podcast.
Heck yeah.
Yep.
So, very good
Yeah,
week.
well.
Very good things to talk about. I think, Kyle, you're taking us out.
I am indeed. Let me just pull up the. You know what? I've done this enough times. I
Yeah,
probably
Aidan
don't
would
need
be
to.
like, you don't have it memorized already?
Yeah, here we go. Knights of the D-Pad is an official publication of the Daily Universe. We'd like to give a special shout out and thanks to Miles Romney and Alan Neves for all that they've done and continue to do to help us make this amazing podcast, as well to Aidan, who offered some valuable technical support for this episode, even though he's out of town. Thank you very much. Also, if you would like to reach out to us with ideas for future topics, just to say hello, or any other kind of feedback, or if you're Scott and just want to chat, reach out to us at knightsofthedpadpodcast@gmail.com, all lowercase, no punctuation, knightsofthedpadpodcast@gmail.com. With that, let's sign out. I'm Kyle.
I'm Lillian.
I'm Hiram.
And I'm Ben.
And we are the Knights of the D-Pad. See you next time.